Daragh, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. It's a long time coming. Like we were just saying, we've known each other for like 7, 8 years. And this is our first time meeting.
Yeah, it's crazy. This happens in here when I have people come in that I've been talking to for so long and I meet them physically for the first time. And it's like, yeah, just sit down and have a chat. But I'm excited because, you know, you seen me before we pressed record. I was like making notes, and I know I have 2 full pages here, but it's usually like 20 pages. But with you, I feel like I know you so well that we can just hold a conversation.
Absolutely.
And also, you know how much I love your page and your message, and I just think people can benefit so much from this. So yeah, I'm excited.
Me too.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro because I feel like people kind of need to know your background. You are a writer, a poet, a published author, a public speaker. You actually had a TEDx talk, which is incredible. But the bit that I love most, and I love all of those bits, but is how you're so passionate about speaking about mental health and well-being. And that's how I came across you. I don't even know how we linked, but I saw your Instagram. I listened to a few of your poems and stuff, and I was just like, wow, this is just absolutely incredible. So maybe if you just take us back and chat to us about how you came to be this person online who's trying to advocate for mental health, especially in young people.
Well, that was a very nice introduction. I'll try and live up to it. Yeah, like, I mean, I'm trying to think now. Yeah, I don't know how we found each other. And I remember, like, as I said a while ago, I was following you and you had like 2,000 followers.
You're an OG.
Yeah, which is mad considering where things are now for both of us. But yeah, like I was always writing. Like I remember my first, in the TED Talk, you'll have seen that. Like I wrote my first poem when I was 7, first short story when I was 11. And my mom still has both of those, bizarrely. And then when I went into secondary school, I was playing a lot of basketball. So I kind of fell out of writing. Like I was still reading a lot. Like I remember when I was like 9 or 10, my parents sat me down and they were like, we have to get you to join a library because we can't sustain your book habit. Like I was buying too many books that they were like, this is too expensive. So I was just always massively into it and just found it really, it was an escape, like, and you just go into a different world and all that kind of stuff. But then in secondary school, like, was more into the sport and basketball took over my life. And that's where I met Irby, who's my best friend. And then like there was the kind of, because I went to an all boys school, that there was an element of like, even if you do like poetry and fiction, you can't really say that publicly. Like you have to pretend that you hate English and you hate everything. But so there was like a kind of hidden part of me where I was always like still, and every now and then I'd still go back and write a few things, but nothing seriously. And then when I was 17, Irby took his own life. And that really set me on the course of where my life is now. Because like we didn't know he was struggling, which is the scariest part, like, because Irby was very much a outgoing, enthusiastic, charming person, like, and he just was always up for the crack and was a really good basketball player. And it just, look, from the outside looking in, even as close as I was to him, it just seemed like everything was going fine. Now, he did complain about stuff, but he complained about stuff we all complained about, like school or his parents or whatever. But so then, yeah, he died, and that was my like introduction to mental health. Because before that, like, we were living in a bubble. Like, it was very, uneventful childhood. And then that was kind of the first massive bit of trauma. And what I took from it was that, like, one, suicide isn't just something that happens in other places. It happens wherever, and your mental health can get so bad that it can kill you. Which, as a 17-year-old, was quite a scary introduction to mental health. Like, I suppose the typical, or the one you'd hope for, is like you have a bit of anxiety and that's your introduction to mental health. But so after that, like, I was grieving, and I thought my grief was just extended because we were so close and it was just going on for a long time. But I had actually, like, kind of descended into depression, but because of the lack of education, I didn't know I was depressed, because my idea of depression was that you were always sad. And that wasn't my experience. I just started feeling nothing And because I was like coming up to 18 as well, I just thought this is what adults were like, that everyone just stopped feeling emotions and you pretend emotions for the rest of your life. And I was like, okay. And then I went and did applied psychology in UCC. And I was sitting in a lecture one day and we were learning about depression. And this was probably in second year, which means I had been depressed for 3 years at this point. And they were talking about the symptoms and they talked about emotional anhedonia, which is this emotional numbness. And I kind of realized then that I had depression. But because of like the stigma that's in society, I mean, it's less now, but this is, we're talking 13, 12 years ago. I like denied it because I was like, no, if I have depression, it means there's something wrong with me and people are going to treat me differently and my parents are going to be disappointed and all this kind of really like toxic anxiety. So I denied it for a further year. Was using like being busy as a way to cope. So like again from the outside looking in, and like it kind of ran parallel to Irby's experience. Like it looked like I was just kind of thriving, like I was socializing, I was playing basketball, I had a part-time job, but I was just trying to avoid spending time on my own. And then one day we're out for Rag Week in Cork, and I took ecstasy for the first time. And that was like more because I felt kind of left out of the friend group I was in, and that was a whole other thing. But I regretted taking it like immediately. And then when the drug kind of started taking effect, I had a massive panic attack on the street, like huge. And I didn't know what it was because I'd never had one. But luckily I was surrounded by a lot of psychology students. So they knew what was happening. And two of the lads brought me home and that was fine. It was all safe. But it was after that, like I very much felt like it hit rock bottom. Because one, like using drugs was something I would have never done. Like it wasn't really in my wheelhouse. So I felt like I was now scraping the bottom of the barrel for coping mechanisms. And like that could have went very dark very quickly if I went into like using drugs regularly, and I didn't want to do that. So I was like, okay, there's something going on that we're not addressing. And that's why I went to therapy for the first time, student counselling, and then, got through that, started coming out of depression, and that's kind of when I started the blog and Thoughts Too Big and started writing about mental health. And that's where poetry came into my life for the first time as well, because I was using it. It was interesting, like, because I was recovering from depression, but I still wasn't really familiar with emotions because I had kind of lived without them for 4 or 5 years. So when I started feeling emotion again, it was very subtle and like quiet, and I didn't really know what the emotions were. So writing about them helped me to kind of stay with them for longer. So if I was like feeling sad or anxious or stressed, if I wrote about them, even if it was a negative emotion, I was like, at least we're feeling something and like we can work through this. And that's kind of where poetry came in. It was very much a mental health tool. And obviously now it's expanded into like something I do as part of my work. But it really started as like, this is just helping me.
I just think that's fascinating in terms of you going through kind of step by step your process. Just because I think there'll be so many people who resonate with it, and personally I do as well, because when I started listening to your content and I started to understand your story, to be honest with you, Daragh, it kind of helped me, because I think, first of all, when I had the same experience of Mark taking his own life, I was 19, so like 2 years older than you, but I went into that place of like, didn't feel anything, and my coping mechanisms were kind of the same. It was like, stay busy, do not allow yourself time to think. And also another coping mechanism of mine was, I only found this out like recently, well in the last 5 years through therapy, was trying to be the best so that I would feel like him taking his own life wasn't my problem, because he was my boyfriend. So I was like, surely I'm the person who should have been the reason for him to stay. So everything I did then was like I had to be the best at this, so that people are like, you're so good, so that now I'm worthy. I'm not this person who like, causes other people to take their own life, so very, very dark place. Mine lasted for like 10 years. It was like from 19 to the age of 29. But what I find fascinating by your story, and I didn't realize this about myself either, and this is why I love your page, I love everything about you because I find I can resonate so much. But when you were saying there about you didn't know you were depressed, like that's just the weirdest concept, but it's so true. Like I was actually the same. Like I only through going to therapy, I started when I was about 29. I was like, like, so I thought, you know, Mark struggled with mental health. You know, he took his own life, but that was his story. I was just the person who was there witnessing it, never realizing that what I went through actually led me down a similar road, you know?
Yeah.
But I love how you were saying there about getting into poetry and getting into writing was what kind of took you out of that. And your TED talk, which I watched again last night, I loved how you said it doesn't have to be poetry, it doesn't have to be writing, but your whole thing is about creating. So like create things, even if it's not for people, if it's just for yourself, maybe getting into that flow state. For you were saying that when you were writing poetry, when you were writing down words, it allowed you to feel the feelings and then process it. Because I think a lot of us, and I personally did for so many years, was I avoided feelings. Like we don't want to sit with feelings because it's so uncomfortable. But I think it's the only way, you know, to come out the other side. But you also mentioned on your TED talk just after this, you were saying like a life without feeling or a life without emotion isn't really living, you know? And I love the quote, it's the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your connections. And you were saying like if you're not feeling anything, if you're not connected with anyone, you can be surrounded by so many people, but you're still feeling alone.
Because you feel like, I mean, there's a lot there. You do feel like no one understands you. I think that's for me is what loneliness comes from, is that you don't feel like anyone around you understands what you're going through. And like with emotion, like it's linked to how you remember stuff. Like you need an emotional connection in some capacity for your memory. So like that's why everyone remembers all the happiest days of their life and the saddest days of their life and the day they were the angriest, because you need that emotion to actually code the memory. So that's why like it's so common that people who are depressed and had this emotional numbness, those years of their lives are kind of foggy and they don't really remember a lot of it unless there was like spikes of emotion here and there, like happy days. But for the most part, it's like that part of my life for me is like very much vague. Like I remember bits and pieces, but like I can't remember a lot of detail. And like people like my brother and my friends can remember specific things. And I'm like, how are you remembering that? And it's because they have emotional connections to what was happening. But with the thing about like not knowing you're depressed when you're depressed, like I've always used the metaphor of like dusk. So like, you know, when a day is coming to an end, there's that period where it's both night and day, and then you don't even realize that it's gotten dark. And you might never realize it, like if you're busy, that it's gotten dark because like you're just been going through the day, dusk, dark. And that's kind of what happened. Like it was like I didn't even see the lights going out because it was it doesn't just happen like one day you're fine, the next day you're depressed. It's so gradual that you don't even realize how much things have changed. And it was only really when I came out of depression, and it's probably similar for yourself, that I realized how bad it had been, because with that lack of emotion, there's also no fear. So you're not afraid of the fact that you're not feeling emotion because you can't feel that fear either. So you feel like everything, like I knew I wasn't feeling anything, but I wasn't concerned about it. So I was like, there was nothing to, it was like losing Irby. There was so much emotion with that it kind of caused my like emotional circuit board to like blow, and then there was just no more emotion after that. And the work with like writing, and as you said, like it doesn't have to be writing, because I don't like to pigeonhole creativity, like, because there's creative moments every day, like that's kind of what we do as human beings. And yeah, it doesn't have to be shared either. Like, I mean, the first 4 years of me writing poetry, I didn't show anyone, like it was just for me. And that, like, because I think there's the creating and then there's the sharing, and that's very vulnerable state to be in. And it's the thing most people struggle with, because they're like, I don't know how people are going to take this, how they're going to think of me, and they're worried about what other people are thinking. But the creating in its own right is the thing that actually does the work. And then sharing it is like the bonus round if you want to share it, but you don't have to. Like that's kind of a different thing. But the real process and the healing or whatever is in the actual creative work. Because like the the quote I used in the TED talk was Viktor E. Frankl when he was talking about the Holocaust. He was saying suffering ceases to become suffering the moment it finds meaning. And I think if you can use your kind of bad experiences to create art or create a business or create connections, like, then that suffering isn't in vain. But if you kind of just leave it consume you, then it's like it's all been destructive.
That's so interesting you say that, because it just literally popped in my head there when you were like, because when you say creative, like everyone, well, my mind definitely goes to like art and writing and poetry and stuff. But when you said there, like, you can use creativity to create a business, I actually had an occupational therapist on here, Padraig Danaher. And before we pressed record, it was like I had a free therapy session with him, right? And I was talking about like, coping mechanisms, and that when I like set my mind to something, I don't stop. And it's a good thing, but it's also a really bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, and I was like, yeah, this is my personality, and it's not really great. And he was like, yeah, but do you think you'd be in the position of now like running a successful business without that? And I was like, no, actually. And it was the first time I was like, oh, the whole thing of it wasn't in vain. It actually served a purpose, but I love that, because I wouldn't consider myself as like artistic or anything, but expressing yourself in different ways, whatever suits you. And you talk about building a mental health routine. And I think I heard you mention before, like, you have the things that work for you, but that doesn't work for everyone. And I think it's about each individual finding, like I said 100 times before, but finding what works for you, because we can hear from people talking online and talking about, what helped them. For you is poetry, writing, which is amazing that you're able to use that. But then people can think, oh, well, I'm not like that. Like, that won't work for me. But you have to try.
Yeah.
But can you chat to us a little bit about that, building a mental health routine, and kind of what advice you would give maybe to people and what works for you?
Yeah, for sure. Like, it is true, because like different things work for different people. Like, for example, my brother, his name's Kellie Fleming. He's an ultra marathon runner. So he runs, and I don't mind running. Like, I'll do 5K, but his run is like, his minimum run is like 20 kilometers, and that's his mental health. That works for him. And I'm like, that would be torture for me. Like, so you do have to find your things. Now, there are like, in my experience, there's certain things that work for everyone. And these are like the things in the mental health routine that are like more directly related to your physical health. Like, so the 5 ones I have are like drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, exercising, spending time on my own, and spending time with people. They're like the non-negotiable things that I'm like, everyone should probably do these 5. Because like, I think what's happened is we're very accustomed to like a physical health routine. Get enough sleep, take your vitamins, eat properly, like look after your body. But those things also affect your mind and your mental health. We just don't really think of them in that vein. Like, so when I go to the gym now, I'm not really focusing on my physical appearance. I'm more like prioritizing, like, if I go for this run, I will get endorphins and I'll feel better and I'll feel less anxious. And the side effect of that is I might lose a bit of weight. But that's not the main thing I'm focusing on. I'm really focusing on the mental thing. So exercise, and like, again, like, this depends on who you are. Like, as I said, for my brother, it's ultra marathons. For me, it's 5 kilometers. Like, whatever level you're at, it doesn't have to be overly difficult to exercise. You can go for a walk. Water intake, like, there's lots of studies on if you're dehydrated, you're like, the chances of you developing depression and anxiety like triples or something if you're dehydrated consistently. Same with lack of sleep. Like, there's a book by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep, I think it's called. Brilliant book. Scared the shit out of me. Like,
me too.
Yeah, terrifying. But like, yeah, that book just woke me up to like, okay, we need to stop fucking around with getting 5 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep, get at least 7 every night. And then the 2 things, I read a book, it was called Solitude. I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote it. But he was talking about like the benefit of spending time on our own and how our society has gotten completely adverse to it because of like social media and all these distractions that we're now very uncomfortable spending time in our own heads. But he talks a lot about how like all like the greatest minds that have ever lived talk about going for these long solo walks, and that's where they get the like ideas and where things connect and where they get to know themselves. Because I think, especially when I was writing Lonely Boy, like the thing I realized there was that if you get comfortable spending time on your own and actually learn about what you want and what you like and dislike, you develop a relationship with yourself. And I think a lot of us in the society we live in, it's not our own fault, but like we don't really have a strong relationship with ourselves because we're not actually spending time with ourselves. Because like I'm, you know, I do it as well. Like if I'm at home and I'm on my own, I might put on a podcast or put on music or put on TV in the background, like, because there isn't like a resistance to like spending time quietly on your own because we're like kind of afraid. And that's like remnants of the depression. Like, so when I was depressed, I really didn't want to spend time on my own because the thoughts were so negative, and there's probably a fear associated with that coming back. But having that ability to spend time on your own, and it does the same with like learning to meditate. It's not like you start today and you have to do an hour. Like, do 5 minutes and then do 10 minutes, because like meditating is hard and spending time on your own with your own thoughts is hard as well. So it's just getting used to that, and then making time to spend with other people, like socializing, I think is obviously very good for our mental health. So they would be the 5 like non-negotiables, and then the rest of the mental health routine is where you kind of, again, you can get creative with it. Like there's a creative element to this as well, like the things that you know bring joy to your life. So for me, like reading and writing, massive, but I know some people who hate reading. I like meditating. I don't like meditating for long times, but I like meditating for like 10, 15 minutes. I'm a big Marvel fan, so I'll make sure I have a ticket for the next movie as soon as possible, and that's something to look forward to. And I think having something to look forward to is really important. But those things might be different for someone else. So it's just finding like having your like 5 non-negotiables that work for everyone, and then building out the rest of your routine with things that you know you enjoy. But then like not like hustle culturifying this thing where it's like
tick the box.
Yeah, where you have to do these things every day, because some days the best thing you like for your mental health might be to not go for the run and to like rest. So it's like finding the things that work and then deciding on the day what things you need. Now you will always need sleep and you'll always need water, but like everything else is like depending on how you're feeling on the day. And I've been using that since pretty much the start of the pandemic, and it's just given me this baseline of like decent mental health. And it also kind of works as an alarm system, because if I'm doing everything on the mental health routine, so I'm doing everything I can to sustain my mental health, and I still feel like low or extremely anxious or there's something wrong, then that tells me I need to like seek further help, like seek third party help, because like I'm doing everything I possibly can and there's still something going on. So it's like an alarm system as well, which is really helpful. And it's kind of at different points over the last 5 years has like pointed me to like maybe I should go back to counselling and do a few sessions. So like it's been really, really helpful, and it's really easy. So that's that.
I love that, because it's actually like applicable. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, here's 5 things. And I couldn't agree more. I remember, I don't know if it was Dr. Matthew Walker, but somebody saying we're basically a nation of dehydrated, underslept animals. Do you know what I mean? And it really is highlighted for me in the coaching that I do with people. So you were saying there, right? So exercise, you do it, and it's great if you increase your fitness along the way, but you're not doing it actually for a physical thing. And when I train my clients and they're with me, over a long period of time, let's say 6 months to a year, they start to be, think along those lines. For so many people, exercise is this thing that they hate doing, but they have to do because they need to get to a certain body composition or whatever. But you need to look at exercise. And as you said, even a walk, like that is exercise, but you need to be doing it as a tool to keep like your mental health taken over. For me, I'm lucky enough where I'm not exercising to drop weight or to fit into a dress size. I am exercising, not now anyway, but I am exercising to basically maintain a certain level of my mental health, So I love those, because there's added bonuses, but I think we need to check back in with those 5 things, as you said, make sure we're on top of them. Not that it's a list that you have to tick every day, but just make sure you're focusing on them, and then all of the other things that work for each person. But it's you're like bringing up things for me here as you speak. I was just like, oh shit, he's catching me out, because when you said there, when you're doing all of these things and you still don't feel great, well, then you have to seek external, help, third party help. And I literally said to Mo the other day, I was like, I think I'm going to book back in for a few counselling sessions, because just, things happen, January blues and stuff. But I say it like openly, and that's why I love your page as well, how you're so open about it. It's not like, I think a lot of people, right, have this narrative of like, I struggled with my mental health and I did this, and this, and now I'm fine. And, and I'm very much like, yeah, I'm fine today, which is great. But like, you dip, it ebbs and flows. And I think that was a fear of mine in the past for so long. So I had this thing in my head where I was like, when I had a bad day or my mood was low, because I'd done so much work, right, of coming out of this really dark place, and then I'd feel low, I would have this signal in my head where I was like, shit, I'm going to feel like this forever. Do you know that kind of way? Yeah. Whereas I heard a quote from Stephen Fry, and it was something along the lines of, he looks at as his mental health like the weather, and he's like, if it's raining today, you're not like, for fuck's sake, stop fucking raining, it's gonna rain forever. He's like, it mightn't stop tomorrow, but it will stop one day. And that's kind of the thing that keeps me ticking over when I do fall into, like yesterday, I had a call with my clients, a live call, and I was like, today was a fucking shit day. It's probably because I'm like, when is Mo getting home? And the solo parenting thing needs to stop now. But you know what I mean? It's not like I used to catastrophize it because I was like, shit, I'm going backwards. I'm going back into that. But I love how you're like, do all of these things to keep yourself ticking over, and then like realize that you wait, like it's normal to not feel great for the rest of your life. It's this managing of expectations, I think.
It would be far more abnormal if you were happy 24/7. So like, yeah, with the emotional thing, we're never worried that happiness will last forever.
So true.
We're never like, or when we're happy, we're never like convinced like this is it now forever. We're like, this is going to be gone at some point in the next week. Like we know, but like when it comes to like negative emotions, like especially like sadness or grief or like stress, we're like, I'm going to be like this forever. Like our brain tricks us into, but we don't believe that about positive emotions, and they're not like inherently different. They're the same thing. They just react in different ways to your body, and that's where you're feeling the way you are. So like they always, like by definition, emotions are temporary. Like your body doesn't have enough chemicals to like keep it going forever. So like it does change, but I think when we're feeling the negative ones, we're like, this is how it's going to be now for the rest of my life, which is bizarre. Like, it's very human. It's a very human thing to do. So like there's no like judging, but it's just something we do. But to be aware of that is important. And like, yeah, like with the, because like I talk about mental health so often because I struggle with my mental health, but there is kind of this, as the years have gone on, like, and people reach out to me all the time and they just want something to talk, and I love that. But like, there's kind of this assumption that because I'm talking about mental health all the time, that my mental health is always good.
Yeah.
And like, I might be writing about one thing in the blog one week and it might be about stress or anxiety. And I'm like, the reason I'm writing about this now is because I'm feeling this now. It's not like, you don't just like, and I remember when I came out of therapy the first time and I felt like I was getting back on track, like, and I was only like 22. I was like naively being like, all right, I've done depression, take it off. It's never coming back, but it's something that will come back for the rest of my life, and it's how you deal with it and how early you acknowledge it and get the help is how severe it's going to be. Like, at least and it obviously different for everyone, but at least in my experience, that's been the case. Because the reason I developed a mental health routine to begin with is because first few months of the pandemic, because exercise has been such a kind of crutch for me, and I couldn't play basketball and there was no gyms, I could feel the kind of low mood coming back, and I was like, I don't want to go back to that place, so I need to figure out the things I can do that will help my mental health. And that's kind of where the routine thing came from. So it's just, and like the second time it comes back is way scarier than the first time, because the first time, I didn't even know. But when you feel that kind of numbness coming back, it's really scary because you're like, I don't want to go back to that place. That was a rough few years. So trying to keep on top of it. But like, I've bad days, I've bad weeks, I've bad months. Like, it's up and down.
Yeah, and that's why I love your message, as I say, because it almost, when I log onto your page, it makes me feel like I'm not alone, you know? And I love that message because I would hate for people to think, you know, as you said, oh, I've done depression, I went to got therapy and that's me done now, you know, I'm over that. That's not the case. And I think that gives me a sense of peace, realising that, you know, if when I do have a low mood again, I don't feel great, whether it's a day, a week, a month, it will pass, and that I'm not alone. And I was reading an article actually, where someone was interviewing you, and you said they asked you what advice you would give to a young person struggling with mental health, and I loved your answer. You said allow yourself to feel the feelings, because you have to sit with it, and you have to realise that. I think a big thing for me was realising that I am not the feeling. I'm just experiencing the feeling, because, you know, we say to ourselves when we're feeling depressed, like, I am depressed. I am this person who has this thing and I'm never going to get over it. But I think if you sit with it and allow yourself to feel it, because in that article, actually, you're probably like, how do you fucking know all this? But in the article, you actually said as well, you said when you were struggling, like when you were younger, you always told yourself you were fine, but you weren't.
Yeah.
And I think isn't that the first roadblock to get over, is to realise, right, I'm not all right, but I'm not my feelings.
And I think part of that for me anyway was like ego driven. Like as a young man, like I was probably like 17 or 18 and I was feeling this way. And like there's a element of like masculinity in there as well, where it's like I'm not supposed to be feeling like this, so therefore I'm fine, and just kind of pushing the emotions away because that's what was expected. So there's a lot of like societal pressure to be, even when you're struggling, to be like I'm fine, whereas like the healthiest thing you can do and like the most, I don't know, like reasonable thing to do, I like now, like the way I look at it now compared to when I was like 18 is crazy, like, but so different. But like the healthiest thing, and probably like if you want to talk about like toxic masculinity and like positive masculinity, the most positively masculine thing you can do is like embrace the fact that you're feeling an emotion, because then you don't become a monster who lashes out and like blame, like, because there was a time when I was depressed that like it was everyone else's fault, whereas like there is that element of your own role in, and I talk about this like extensively in Lonely Boy, like acknowledging the role you play in your own life and how like decisions you've made or things you haven't done, or the fact that I ignored I had depression for 3 years has made this worse. Like you do have to acknowledge your own responsibility, as painful as it can be. So like rather, I think it's just more responsible for yourself. And like I can't remember who said this, but like this idea of like looking after yourself as if you're someone you loved, which you should be obviously, but like as if you're actually another person, and like you'd never let like your partner or your brother like go on that way. You'd be like, no, like there's something clearly wrong and we need to get you help. But for some reason we just don't give ourselves that compassion. And I think as we get older we get better at it. But like if we could really get in like in the brains of like teenagers early, that like when you're not fine, and it is that cliche of like it's okay not to be okay. I actually don't think it's okay not to be okay. I think it's okay to be struggling, but it's not okay to ignore it and let it consume you, like, and that's from my own experience. Like you actually do have to take action and responsibility in acknowledging it, because otherwise, you know, if you do it once it's a mistake, if you do it the second time it's a choice, and all that kind of stuff. And at a certain point when I was depressed, I was choosing it, like, because I was afraid of the perceived ramifications. Like my parents are going to think there's something wrong with me, people are going to stop treating me differently, all these like things I was worried about that I had no proof for, but they were the things I was scared of. So I didn't look after myself, because I was like, to look after myself, I have to admit I have this.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. So uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable sitting down and realising that although it's not your fault, it's your responsibility, you know, and that if you're not going to take action, nothing's going to change. But as you said, it's so hard to do it ourselves. So like when you said that about, you know, treating yourself as someone you love, I actually get my clients to do this as a call to action.
Nice.
And I'm just like, I've little things that I get them to do. And I'm just like, before I say that, I'm just like, imagine your best friend and they're going through this, that, and the other, and like really awful things. Like, what would you say to them? And like, we know our response is like, we would be the first person there to help. But when we go through the same things, our automatic response isn't compassion, it's judgment, you know? So looking at yourself from a place of compassion and curiosity to try and take action steps to change rather than just fucking judgment, because we all just berate ourselves, don't we? Like this Irish thing of, how dare you tell yourself you look good today, you know? Like,
and what we're like, the Irish thing is an interesting one, because like, and you've probably experienced this a lot as well, considering like the trajectory you've been on, but like this idea of notions, and like, I always think the Irish thing is like, we want people to do well so long as we don't feel they're doing better than us. I really think that's like a massive like Irish stereotype that no one really talks about.
It's so true. Like the quote, it literally came into my head there. Alex Mose, he says, people want you to do well, but never better than them.
Yeah.
You know, like he was like, when he was like had no money and he was sleeping on the gym floor, and people would come in, his customers, and they'd be like, no, come on, you can do it, you can get it. And now he's a millionaire, and they're like, who the fuck does he think he is? You know, it's so true.
And like the thing that's like the other quote that's like in tangent with that, like, is no one who's ahead of you will ever like talk shit about you, because like they don't actually perceive you as doing better than them, so why would they talk shit about you? So it is like, there is a truth to those kind of like just things we all do. And like, it's definitely like, it's a joke to say it's just Irish, like that's kind of universal, but we do have this idea, you know, the thing with notions, and like, sure, she has notions, like who does she think she is? And it's just like, I think there's something you're not dealing with that you're projecting onto this person. That's generally how I think about it.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say, I think all negativity coming from somebody else is just a projection of something going on within themselves. And again, like, I know I talk about my coaching a lot, but I think true coaching people has literally helped me, you know, and you're trying to teach someone something, you actually learn more about yourself. And I've learned that as I've gone on, that, you know, people who are saying whatever about you, whether it's, you know, oh, who does she think she is, trying to lose a bit of weight or whatever, with my clients, they're just fucking projecting negativity. And usually it's from a place of shit, they're going to like do this thing and they're going to leave me behind, you know? But it's so hard for you to get into that headspace to believe that, because like, obviously it's fucking upsetting when people are chatting shit about you.
I know.
But it's trying to, when you change the way you look at things you look at change. And when you said that thing there about, think about you being ahead of someone, would you even give that person a second thought in terms of, you know, being negative towards them? And the answer is no. So the people who are saying these things are usually, you know.
Yeah, like, because like typically if someone's like perceptibly behind me, my first instinct is to like encourage them to like drive it on. And then the thing with like people, because like it happened, and I don't know when this switched, because I remember when I first started doing like public stuff and being online, and I'd get like negative comments, it would like consume me. But now it's kind of like, if I get a negative comment, I'm like, this person isn't happy. Like, this person is using their, you know, their time, which isn't going forever. Like, they're using their time on earth to like be online to talk shit about someone else. I'm like, this person's deeply unhappy, and it's kind of more sending them like love and hoping that they'll be okay, and like sincerely, not being like a little shit and being like genuinely, like, even if I don't talk to them, like mentally being like, I hope that person gets through whatever's going, like, helps me to like deal with the fact that they're talking shit about me, because I'm like, they're hurt, they're like in a bad place, and I've been in a bad place, so I understand. And just like being like, this isn't about me, and taking yourself out of it, because I think the part of us that gets upset about people talking shit is our ego. Like, so the more you can take that out of the equation, the more like you see people with compassion.
I literally had at the end of my notes here talking, I'm gonna ask you about negativity, because like your page is pretty much blown up on social media, and I was gonna ask you, do you get negativity from people, and how do you deal with it? But I love that answer, because maybe I'm not as far as far along as you, but I've had that journey as well. It's like when my page kind of exploded, not everyone's going to love you, obviously. And people just saying stupid things. Now, to be honest, I haven't had that bad. You know, I know some people online get absolutely trolled, but just stupid little silly comments. And at the start, I would get so angry about it, you know. But I genuinely have got to a place now, like you, it's kind of two things for me. First of all, is the thing that you just said, like that person has shit going on. Like if they were in a happy place in love and life, they wouldn't even have the fucking energy to be, you know, commenting this. So I do be like, oh, you know, they're in a bad place. And also the fact I'm coming around to this more and more lately is that like people are allowed to have opinions of you, and their opinions of you are allowed to be different than the opinion you have of yourself, you know? So like I may be posting these things and think they're shit. And other people have a right to have a different opinion. You know, so yeah, I loved your response in that. But is there anything else that you do to help with social media? Because I know a lot of people on here look at social media, and a message of mine as well is how to improve our relationship with it. So how do you deal with negativity through social media or in life, actually, in general?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a hard question to answer. But like, I think the main thing people, when they're like talking about like maybe sharing their work or starting the podcast or the business, they're afraid of what other people think and what they will directly say to them, and that usually comes in the comment section. So they're afraid of getting that like negative feedback. And the reality is, like, if you're going to be a public person, this is just part of it, part of the course. And actually, I would say you're probably not saying anything interesting if no one's talking shit about you a little bit.
So, yeah.
You know?
So it's a compliment.
Yeah. Because like what happens is like there might be 100 comments and there might be like 2 negative ones, and we'll just be obsessed with the negative ones. But most people are like, this is good job. So understanding that, but then like practical things I do, I've been doing this for like maybe 3 or 4 years. Like I have notifications turned off on everything except WhatsApp, because that's like people I actually know messaging me. So then when I go into Instagram or TikTok, there's, especially if a video's like blowing up, there's too many notifications to actually go through them all. So it's kind of like, because if you were like, had notifications on and you were like looking at it all the time, you'd see every comment come in as it came in. But if I'm off it for 6 hours and then I come back and there's 500 comments, I'm like, well, I'm not reading through that. I don't have any time. So then you're not reading the comments. And that would be something like, it depends, obviously at the start, it might be 1 or 2 comments on your videos so you can read them. But it gets to a point where like, it's actually just going to work against you to be consuming all the comments, good or bad. Like, it's just too much. Just kind of, once a video reaches that like escape velocity, I'm like, well, I'm no longer interacting with this because it's kind of its own thing now. But if it's like a smaller video and people are commenting, I'll try and comment back. But so that helps. Like having notifications off has made a massive, massive difference. And then just like what we just said, like understanding that like it's not really about you. And this is with the caveat of like, unless you're being a prick. If you're putting up content and you're being horrible, then like the negative comments are probably on point. Like, yeah. But if you're just, because I remember one time this is years ago, I put up a video and it was a really short video. And it was like, one thing I do for my mental health that really works is exercise. So if you have the ability to exercise, I would make it a priority. And the amount of people who were calling me ableist in the comments,
I've had that before.
And I was like, I literally said, if you have the ability, like, and they're like, oh, but like not everyone can exercise. And I was like, but I'm not saying like everyone should exercise like me, like, because some people, because I like going to the gym, but some people just go for walks. Like, we're all at different levels. It's just about movement rather than like everyone should be doing marathons. Like, that's not what we're talking about. And it's really just more about the mental health aspect than anything. But like, it is that kind of classic example. Like, if you say you like red, people will be like, why don't you like blue? You hate, it is that, unfortunately, online. And really, when it comes down to it, like, you just get used to it. You just get used to people saying negative things. And like, honestly, sometimes they're hilarious as well. Some of the things people say are actually gas. Like, I put up a poem last week called Dangerous Men. And it was about like basically me saying like, if I ever have boys, they'll be dangerous men, but like not the danger that we're like used to. Like, they'll be like anti that kind of masculinity. And one guy just commented saying gay. And I was like, is it gay to have children? So like, I think stuff like that can be quite funny, and just to not take it so personally, like, because most of these people don't know who you are. They see something, they don't like it, they comment, and they never think about it again.
That's a good point in terms of not taking it personally, because we all, like, any negativity that we get, we automatically, like, this is a personal attack on me as a person. But as you just said, they haven't got a clue who you are.
Yeah.
And also a couple of points you made there about if you're going to be a creator and to share it with the world, like, it's part and parcel, isn't it, of it? And just to manage it in the best way you can. So when you said notifications, same as me. I literally have no notifications except WhatsApp as well. And I also don't read comments. So that's a new thing for me. I'm just like, I'm not even given, like, so I didn't even know if they're good, they're bad, but I'm not given that, you know, that power to somebody else to take, I suppose, my peace of mind. But another thing, I heard this quote before and I thought it was amazing because it came into my head when you were talking about WhatsApp there. And I think about this a lot. This guy online, as people were saying, how do you deal with negativity? I think he's like this massive big like actor or something. And he said, basically, if you have a problem with me, call me. And if you don't have my number, you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. And I was just like, that is literally perfect. You know, we allow these people, when we think, oh, they're going to judge this, they're going to judge that. Who's they? Like, who's the face?
Who are the big bad
Who are the big bad they, you know? And usually it's just a collective of people that, like...
And we also, like, it is kind of a shared hallucination, like, this they. Like, there's no, like... No, like, you might have people who don't like you, but there's no, like... They're not, like, conspiring against you. Like, you know, like, I do think we have... It's like the spotlight effect in psychology. Like, we think people are thinking about us as often as we're thinking about ourselves. And like, no, like, just take how often you're thinking about yourself and apply that to everyone else. They're all thinking about themselves as well. Like, that's just, we're all just self-absorbed for the most part. Like, so like, no one's really thinking about you. And if they are, it's quite transient and like passive. And if they comment something negative, they're probably just like shitposting. Like, it's not real. But like, I would take it seriously if someone I knew came up to me in the street and was like,
yeah,
I don't like that you did this, this and this. And I'd be like, okay, this is real. But like, the internet isn't real. Like, it's useful. It's useful. It's fun. But like, putting too much value in it can be dangerous. Like, and I think there is especially for young people, like, there is a danger of that happening where like people are like, you know, their inherent value as a person is directly linked to how many followers they have and how many likes they're getting and how like well known they are online. But I'm like, all of this could go away tomorrow and you need to know who you are outside of this as well. And that needs to be more important than who you are online, because when this inevitably goes away, because things always change, you're going to be left with nothing and you won't have any sense of like self-esteem or self-worth because you've based it on, I have X amount of followers on Instagram.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's so dangerous, Daragh, because it's just getting worse, isn't it? Like, like when you're talking there, I'm just like constantly thinking about my kids. Like, I'm literally like an anxious mother. I was on the call last night to my clients. I was saying, it's funny, but not funny. The girls were born premature, right? So they were in the NICU for 2 weeks. And I remember it was about 7 days in and I started crying and Ma was like, what's wrong? And I was like, what if the girls get bullied at school for having 2 moms? And she's like, they're 7 days old, you know, so I'm just like parent anxiety. Yeah. And now I'm like thinking about, you know, social media but it's just so dangerous that I honestly can't even imagine having teenagers, although obviously I will, but it's just trying to, I suppose, get them early and instill that sense of you need to know who you are as a person outside of social media because it's not real, you know.
Yeah.
And you were saying before we came online here about, you know, numbers and trying not to consume, trying to just create. And that's something that I've set a New Year's resolution I've set for myself this year. I actually have it written in my little diary. It says, create, not consume. So this year I'm trying to be a lot better in what I allow in.
Yeah.
Because I said, the other day I said this in a conversation, I can't remember, but actually it was at an event I was speaking at and a person asked me like, how do you, you know, deal with all negativity online and stuff? And I literally just said, you are in control of who you surround yourself with, both in real life, but also on social media. And I think we forget that.
Mhm.
So I'm like in this era of like unfollow. Like if you're following someone and every time their post comes up or whatever and it makes you feel less than, inadequate, makes you compare yourself, like you can unfollow, but you don't even have to actually unfollow. You can just mute their page and never see their stuff again. So I think, you know, we forget, and it's easy to forget because it's not this real thing, but we think it's this real thing. And we're constantly comparing the worst version of ourselves to the best version of everybody else. Because like, what are people doing online? They're posting their pictures on holiday and they're, you know, and everybody's doing it. So we're in this comparison syndrome, but we're not comparing to a real thing. And that's why, I know I keep saying this, but I love your page, because when I go onto it, it's one of the pages where it's like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. You know, these feelings that I'm feeling, you know, other people feel them, even though, you know, it might seem like they don't because this whole social media thing.
Yeah. And like I've tried, because I think what you're really talking about is like the things that don't make you compare yourself to someone else is if they're being authentic. And I think we all know, like, even when we're comparing ourselves to like our favorite influencers or people doing really cool stuff, we can sense it's not real, but that doesn't, like, our brains don't know that, like, or like our bodies don't know that. But like when you come across someone who's like, because that's what I always liked about your page, and I think it's part of the reason you've been so successful, is like you're just a real person. There's no like pretense or like faking or like this kind of like, you know, influencery voice tone. It's just real. You're just being you. And I think that's what people really, especially now, want, because it stops you from feeling like bad about yourself. And I've tried to like curate my stuff as best I can, that like, and I think the blog has helped this, that like, okay, yeah, good, cool things have happened. Like I've done a TED Talk, I've had books published, but also most of like this month sucked. And like, and you can read about it here. Like, you know, like I had some really bad days. Like I don't want to be like a highlight reel where everything looks amazing. Because it's like, it's not true. It's not a true reflection of reality. And like trying to make my content and stuff, it's kind of easier to do maybe on TikTok, because you can just like post as many videos as you want. You can give people a real like sense of what your life's like, and although a cool thing might be happening, you might still be dealing with a lot of stress, and that feels more real than being like, look at all the cool things I'm doing and don't think about anything else, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't know that about TikTok, actually. I'm just thinking here because as you were saying there, like creating, not consuming, I actually don't use TikTok anymore because it's like this cesspit of humanity just lurch around TikTok.
Yeah.
I remember when I was like going viral and I was posting my videos, and like everybody on Instagram was like, it's amazing and blah, blah, blah. And I went to TikTok and it was like,
oh, the comment sections are vastly
shit.
different. Yeah.
But you know what I've actually realised? I think I mentioned it on the podcast to someone else as well. The bad L Facebook, that's nearly worse than the TikTok.
Yeah.
I think it's like older generation just can't understand these. It's just
mad. To be fair now, I don't spend too much time on Facebook, but I imagine if I went into my page and looked at the comments, there could be some, because like I had a video that like my brother actually made it, the one of like our Christmas kind of. Did you see that one? So
I'm not sure.
Basically every year.
Oh, you coming home?
Yeah. I come in and like it's Christmas, like every Christmas morning I do that.
Right.
And obviously that went viral, but like some of the comments under that were crazy. Like people were saying, this is obviously staged, this didn't happen, this isn't real. Like there was like a conspiracy, and I was like, I don't care enough about this to have faked this, to have staged.
Yeah.
Like, why would I ever do that? And like when I was posting it, I wasn't like, oh, this is going to go viral. I was like, oh, this is just kind of funny. Like, and then whatever happened. But like, people are like, I think the thing that always like comes back to me is like, people online view everything you do like the least charitable perspective. So they always think you're like lying or being deceitful or not telling the whole truth. There's that's like a characteristic of the culture of the internet. Like you're doing something deceitful
for gain, for some sort of gain. Yeah.
Like this is all fake. And I've never really understood it, because I was like, I just don't care enough about social media to fake anything. Like why would I? Because that happened as well when I got blackmailed for nudes like almost 2 years ago.
I was literally going to actually bring that up and ask you, like, how did you deal with that and stuff? That's insane.
That's
insane.
Yeah, it was one of the worst weeks of my life. And like, I can laugh about it now. And the way I handled it pretty well, and I handled it with humor, because basically it was happening. I blocked the person who was doing it. And
so is this, sorry to cut across you, this was a relationship that like, or?
Yeah, it was like someone I met on like Hinge, like a dating app.
Okay, right.
And we were meant to meet up, and then turns out it was like a catfish type situation. And they had my pictures, and they're like, they rang me like, and it was, I thought I was talking to a girl named...
I was going to say, was it a female at least?
No, no, of course not. Of course
Sorry,
not. I thought I was talking to a girl named Tracy, and it turned out to be this Nigerian lad. And he was like, yeah, you need to send me 2,000 euro in Bitcoin. And I was like, well, I neither have Bitcoin nor 2,000 euro. Like, I have none. And he was like, he was angry at me that I didn't have Bitcoin. So I hung up with him. Then he rang back and he was like, why'd you hang up on me? And I was like, oh, I thought our conversation was over. I hung up on him mid-sentence, like, and he was like, don't hang up on me again. And he's going on about Bitcoin. I was like, come here, look, just send the pictures to my mother. I don't care. I'll let her know they're coming. And I hung up, and then I blocked him, rang my mother, told her to crack. Because like we've always been very like open and supportive. So like that actually made everything a bit easier, because I didn't have to like hide anything.
Yeah.
It was like, and that's kind of, yeah, like the way I deal with mental health was definitely a huge tool, because I was like, I'm okay with talking about these uncomfortable things. So that made it easier. Then he tried to message me on Instagram from all these burner accounts, and he was like, this was ridiculous. Like, he was like, I'll reduce the price to 500 euro. Be a good man. Make the deal with peace. Don't make me ruin your life. And I was like, I don't think I'm making you do anything, actually. I think this is all you.
On you.
So I blocked him. Then he like stopped messaging. But like the fear I had, and this maybe mightn't have been the best decision in hindsight, but it's the way it went. I was like worried that the pictures would be sent out. I wouldn't know they were out, and people would think I didn't know, and then they'd be sent around WhatsApp groups, and people would be like, whatever. It would just be kind of a weird thing that's happening that I wasn't aware of. So I tweeted, and I was like, someone's blackmailing me for my own nudes for 2,000 euro. Obviously, I'm not paying. So if you see my pictures, enjoy them.
I love it. I actually love that.
And that like went viral, honestly, like, again, when we're talking about like negativity bias, most people were super supportive and reaching out and asking if I was okay and if I needed to talk, and it was really lovely. But there were some people that were like, I think you made this up for clout. Like, I think you've made this whole thing up just for the attention. And I was like, I would make up something far less embarrassing than this if I wanted attention. Like, this is mortifying. Like, and one of them was like the chief editor of the Irish Medical Times was like he was like, shaming me about it. Like, and I was like, you're too public a person to be doing this.
That,
like, that's insane. Like, at least go onto a burner account. Like,
make a profile.
Yeah, wild. Like, so it was a wild time. And then obviously I was on like Lucy Kennedy's show talking about it last year, and it's a part of my life that like was really hard and it was embarrassing. But again, because I know the statistics around how often this happens, in particular to teenagers, and there's like a massive amount of suicides because of these things, because like teenagers don't understand that your life will go on. They think this is like the end of everything. I just wanted to talk about it and be like, look, this is a hard time in your life and it will be embarrassing, but no one will care as much as you think they will, and your life will go on. I was like, I'm here 2 years later, everything's fine. It sucks that it happens. Ideally, it wouldn't happen. And the first piece of advice I give is like, just don't send nudes to anyone. Like, pretty simple. But like, if it does happen, like, you'll get through it. It'll be fine. Like anything else, like, you will come through it. But I think, again, because no one really talks about these things that openly because it's uncomfortable, people think they won't get through it because they've never heard of someone that it's happened to being okay afterwards. Like, because there's just no one talking about it. So I was like, here's an example of someone who's okay after it happened. It's fine. Yeah,
and thinking back to your teenage years, you think that what is happening in that moment is everything. Mm-hmm. And it is, as you said, it's like trying to be like, no. Like, yeah, it seems so important to you in that time, but life does go on.
Yeah.
But I get it. I love that how you face that though. It's like kind of like disempowering the person by just like, by the way, lads, there might be a few nudes going around, and send them on to me if
yeah, and just having a bit of crack with it. I was like, this is like, like if I take myself out of this is like objectively kind of hilarious.
Kind of funny. That's, I mean, you have to get to this level to do that, you know.
Yeah.
I can't
Because like some people were like, one guy was like, why would you send pictures of your naked body to anyone? And I just replied to him being like, because I'm hot, obviously. Like, just like, because he was just trying to like shame me. And I was like, nah. So yeah, ideally it wouldn't have happened, but it did. But like, yeah, as I said, you move on, you get through it.
Another thing that I've recently just seen on your page as well is, and I read an article about you, an interview on this as well, is you recently diagnosed with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Was it that you were doing like a test for something online and you were like surprised?
No, so it was actually more like, because I didn't ever think I had ADHD. I was never like suspicious of it because I was quite a good student. But as I've like found out since that, like if you're getting good grades in school, no one will ever suspect there's something wrong because you're doing all the things that they're expecting you to do. But there's a company called ADHD Now who got onto me and they wanted me to do like, just help them promote what they're doing, and they do like private ADHD diagnoses, like, because it's hard to get in the public one. There's just like massive queues. So I was like, oh yeah, like I'd love to help you out, but I actually don't have ADHD. So, and I signposted them to like Chris Hood, Happiness and Movement. Like I was like, he's like a, you know, he has ADHD, he talks about it a lot on his page. He might be someone to get onto to do this. But I was like, if you want, I'll do the consultation and I'll just make a video about what that's like. And like, just for any person, if you were curious about it, this is what the consultation looks like. And they're like, yeah, grand, we'll give you a consultation. So I went into that and I was like, to the therapist, I was like, I don't think I have ADHD at all. I'm just doing this because of, you know, this thing I'm doing ADHD now. And she was like, okay, grand, yeah, no worries. Did the consultation and she was like, I know you think you don't have this, but I think you should go and get a diagnosis. And I was like, oh, that's like, I was just completely like blindsided. Like I just never crossed my mind that I had it. But then a month later, did the diagnosis, like assessment, got diagnosed. And like, you know, you talk through the assessment and the diagnosis, like you go through all these different symptoms, and I realized that a lot of them did affect me. But the reason I suppose I went, like I was 29 when I got diagnosed, 29 years without really feeling like there was something wrong, is that my ADHD doesn't really affect me like negatively, but that's kind of because of I naturally built my life for an ADHD brain. So I work in a creative field, which means like if I'm losing focus between things, that's fine because I can connect those things and like write about it. And then in school, like I was very like, everything was organized for me. So I was like, go to school, and I was good at school. Like I'd have like up until the age of 22, I had photographic memory. It's called adolescent photographic memory. So that made exams and stuff like really easy, which means my ADHD didn't affect it because I didn't really have to pay attention as much as other people. But then once I came out of college, I had to organize my own life. Like I have to, you know, find somewhere to live, you know, pay all the things you need to pay as an adult, and like all these things I had to deal with. That's when my ADHD symptoms started coming out, because like now I have to self-organize, and as it happens, I'm not good at that. And the reason I'm not good at that is because I have ADHD, but it also affects like how I deal with relationships. And like, say for the last 2 years I've lived in Barcelona, I find it really difficult to like be aware of people if they're not like right in front of me, which means long distance relationships, friendships, keeping in touch with people who aren't like around me. It's not that I don't care, I just forget because I'm focused on like 50 other things. And two of the main things the therapist brought up was, she was like, and I just thought this is how everyone was. She was like, does your brain ever stop thinking? Is there a moment in the day where you're not thinking about like 4 or 5 different things? And I was like, well, no, like that's how brains work. And she was like, no. And then she was like, when you get anxious, do you get anxious about one thing or do you get anxious about 50 things? And I was like, yeah, like, yeah, it's that one. And she was like, yeah, that's because the reason I guess I didn't think I had it is because I had like a very stereotypical idea of what ADHD was. So like, you know, the kid in the classroom, he can't sit still and he's being disruptive. And like, I'm not a very like hyper person. Like I'm pretty like chill and mellow. But she was like, but you can be hyperactive internally. And she's like, your brain's hyperactive, but you mightn't be physically hyperactive. But I always thought it was only the physical hyperactivity that was linked to it, and just a lack of understanding of what ADHD was. So it's been like almost a year now. And I think the main thing that came out of it is that like I just have more compassion for myself, because there would have been a time where like if I'm working, like say I'm writing an essay, I'll write 2 sentences, then I'll check my phone, then I'll check my email, then I'll go here, then I'll go there, then I'll be like frustrated because I'm not doing the essay. Now I'm like, this is just how I work. But before I knew I had ADHD, I would have been giving out to myself because I'm like, you're not focusing properly. And it's really, I'm just focusing differently now. Well, I've always been like this, but now I know that it's just, that's how I have to do. I need new stimulation every so often so I can come back and write another two sentences.
Yeah, it's basically just understanding yourself better. I was chatting to another person who was diagnosed as well with ADHD, and they were the same as you. It's like, it's not that it's changed me in any way or I've changed. It's just allowed me to be like, oh, that's why I act the way I do. But it's just so interesting because, again, I would have been very much coming from the place of physical symptoms. Like I wouldn't even have been aware that, you know, internally, you know, can also count for ADHD.
Yeah.
So is it that like you just have like so like as on top of, you know, realizing you work better this way or this is the way you do things, you do a bit of this and then it comes together, but also just the thoughts thing that's like fascinating to me. It's just like so many thoughts all at the same time. I'm like, do people not have that?
Yeah. It's I mean, and then like you understand like when I get like stressed, it's because I'm probably overstimulated and there's too many thoughts and I need to like step away from what I'm doing. But like I didn't know that before. So if I wouldn't have known the reason I'm stressed is because I'm overstimulated. I'd be like, the reason I'm stressed is because I'm not getting enough work done. But it's like, really, you actually need to step away from this and you'll get more work done if you take a break or do something different. But like, yeah, it is just, yeah, as you said, like nothing has changed. I've always been like this. I just now have words to describe it and you just have more of an understanding and it just makes things like there was talk about like going down the medication route and I was like, look, I got through 29 years without even realizing or like being suspicious I had this. So for now, I think I'm okay. But obviously that's an option if things like change and it got more intense. But I'm like, she was basically saying like, because your life is set up the way it's set up, your ADHD isn't affecting you as much as it could. Like she was like, if you worked in like a data entry job in an office, it would probably be a lot worse. And I used to work in jobs like that and I hated it. So I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So you've basically just unknowingly built your life to accommodate this, you know?
Yeah, pretty much which is fair play to subconscious me for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, cheers, Daragh. I have absolutely loved our conversation. I feel like we just sit and shoot the shit just constantly. Yeah. But I want to finish up 2 things, right? Firstly is a quote that I absolutely loved. I read in an article that you had. I think it was about ADHD, but you said, I've always found it a little difficult to exist as easily as other people seem to. I thought that was so beautiful.
Thank you.
And lastly, if you don't mind, would you close us out with one of your poems, please?
Of course. And thank you so much for having me on. And like, yeah, like it feels like I've known you forever. Obviously today's our first day meeting, but like, yeah, we've known each other for like the bones of a decade, but it's been great to meet you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read, I said I'd read a happy poem instead of a sad one. So this is called Let the Light Pour In. I like that we say let the light pour in, as if things can be filled with it. Like light has some of the same characteristics as water. But light doesn't have a dark side the same way water does. Being drowned in light is a good thing, especially when you're lost. What if we were 70% light instead of water? The phrase a beacon of light would apply to all of us. We'd let our light pour in, wouldn't be afraid to let some of it go. We'd share our light, shine ourselves out into the world, and we'd never regret having done so. We'd be the ones who pour light then. When people say, let the light pour in, they'd be talking to us. And what a purpose that would be. Summoning the dawn, guiding people home, keeping darkness at bay. Let the light pour in. feel it change the makeup of your soul?
I'm getting emotional. Even with a happy one, I swear to God, I was going through your page last night just trying to prep, you know, and I was like in absolute floods. I think your stuff just hits so hard because it's so
I appreciate that.
Authentic and relatable. So there you go. Thank you so much, Daragh. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for everyone listening, I can guarantee that you've walked away with something there that you can implement. Incredible episode. And if you do feel like you benefited from the episode, make sure to throw it into your WhatsApp group. And as always, keep her lit, and we will catch you next time.